Most people think the first round is when you win your league. It's not. It's your first 3 picks that make or break your draft. One landmine at the top, your build is broken before it starts, but hit all 3, and that's how you separate before week 1. You ever lock in a pick and just feel peace? Like, no drama, no guessing, no galaxy brain. That's Bijan Robinson in 2025. There's no one safer in round 1 of fantasy drafts. Let's start with the raw numbers, because once you hear them, it's kind of insane. He's not the 101 in every format. Last season, he handled 365 touches, over 1,800 total yards, and 15 touchdowns. He was an RB1 in 10 of his last 12 games, and it didn't come from fluky efficiency or touchdown spikes. He just got the ball over and over and over again. And you want to talk about usage? Final 9 games of the year, 72% of the backfield work, over 120 total yards per game. No timeshare, no hesitation. This is what it looks like when a player fully steps into a role, and he's doing it just at age 23. And the deeper you look, the stronger it gets. His success rate wasn't just good, it was historic. It was one of the highest ever for a back of 250 plus touches. That means every play isn't just a yard here, a yard there. It means he's moving the chains, keeping drives alive and extending those opportunities for touchdowns. And he still hasn't been fully unlocked as a receiver. He's already dominating on the ground. But the crazy thing is, in a limited sample with Penix, he was on pace for over 450 total opportunities. 2,000 yards, very real possibility here. We're not just projecting that anymore. We're kind of living through this breakout, and at the 103, there's a great argument that he could still be the 101. A lot of times you're choosing between floor and ceiling. This guy has both. And the real problem isn't Bijan, it's who we're comparing him to. Like CMC, obviously the usage, the injury risk, all of those things. Saquon, can he repeat what he did last year in a system that really just plays to his upside and his strengths, but there's still some question marks there in the receiving game, touchdowns, all that stuff. But after that, we fall into a tier like Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, and they don't deserve to be in the same stratosphere of Bijan. It's crazy to say this, but at the 103, it still feels like Bijan is the one of that group that's being disrespected. So yeah, he's not a sleeper. This isn't a hot take. This is just me kind of vomiting out some clarity for you guys. But if you're sitting there at the top of your draft and we already know that there's one guy that can give you everything you need, I'm not sure what else you need to see. If you're not going wide receiver with Chase or Jefferson, I don't think you should overthink it. Just take Bijan. He's the best pick of the first round, and the rest of the room is basically just chasing those outcomes the rest of the year. But not every first round player is going to give you clarity, because just a few picks later, there's a name that's rising fast, but might be the exact pick that kills your draft before it even starts. You want to know how people ruin their fantasy drafts early? It's because they're chasing talent blindly without looking at the situation that they're tied to, and no round pick carries more risk in 2025 than Malik Nabers. And this isn't about whether he's good, it's about whether he's draftable at this cost and just a broken setup. You're paying wide receiver 1 overall prices for a guy who's on a bottom tier offense with a collapsing quarterback room and one of the hardest schedules in the league. Let's just lay it out cleanly here. The Giants have 3 quarterbacks in the mix now. Their offensive line was one of the worst in the league, and they're projected to be underdogs in nearly every game this season, which is fine for volume, but at this draft cost, we need massive ceiling and massive touchdown ceiling. So you're telling me that you're going to spend a top 10 pick, not on Chase, not on Jefferson, not on Lamb, but on another ceiling wide receiver on a team like the Giants? He's going to have to carry this entire team for that to be worth his cost. So that's where the red flags for me start stacking. Nabers is undeniably explosive. Like, he can win anywhere on the field. But the setup here forces him to be absolutely perfect. There's no help, no supporting cast, no scoring stability, and the quarterback situation, it's not bad, it's just extremely chaotic. Russell Wilson is hanging on by a thread. Jameis Winston's never been trusted to run an offense for the entire season. And then there's a rookie, Dart. If he's out there early, that's full-time panic mode for this team. So what happens when the production starts to break down? Or even for this team, maybe you're facing a top 5 pass defense again and again, and your quarterback just can't get through those reads. The answer for Nabers is the volume disappears. Maybe the touchdowns completely vanished, and then your wide receiver 1 pick becomes a guy getting 5 targets a game and maybe having a 13-point PPR ceiling. This isn't fear-mongering. This is really just a structural decision that you have to make. Even if Nabers plays well, the ceiling is not there with some of the other guys in this range. He's not going to get schemed into space like some of these other guys, and he's not going to be on one of these teams that scores a ton of points like the Lions. He's really just surviving, and in round 1, that's not enough for me. Here's the part that really flipped this for me. If Nabers fails, you lose. Your season is completely over. But if he hits, he's probably not separating from guys that you can get 10 picks later in drafts. You're risking your draft on a player who has to beat every single obstacle, and that's why this kind of feels like a trap. That's why Nabers doesn't feel good to me in the first round, and this situation makes it almost impossible for him to hit value in this range. Round 1 isn't where we're just chasing vibes or betting on someone's talent. We have to bake in their situation. You're getting a wide receiver 1 who needs to overcome the hardest schedule, a terrible quarterback room, and zero insulation from that inside the system. That's not an edge to me. That's a trap in the first round and one of the worst picks you could make. But if you want a real edge for a limited time, you can get my full draft kit for free. Rankings, sleepers, busts, cheat sheets. Go to fantasyaccelerator.com or just hit the first link in the description. Again, you can get full access for free until week 1, but I'm not promising that that deal is going to stay up all summer. So those are the best and worst picks of round 1, but in round 2, it's still pretty obvious who you need to target and who you need to avoid. What if I told you the best fantasy pick in round 2 belonged to a guy who was labeled boom or bust last year, and this is the rarest kind of second round pick, the one where everything people thought was a fluke actually scaled. And now the ceiling's still there in 2025, but the floor finally caught up. Achane isn't just fast. He isn't just efficient. He's one of the only backs in fantasy with real dual threat insulation. Last year, he racked up 281 touches, over 1,500 total yards, and the biggest change, 78 receptions. He no longer has like that boom or bust change of pace kind of feel. He's the true heartbeat of Miami's short game because Tua stopped throwing deep, the lowest air yards and yards per attempt in the league. And where did all that volume go? It went to Achane. Swing passes, screens, dump offs, timing routes, all built on getting the ball in space and keeping this offense on schedule. But what if Achane was able to get like real workhorse volume? That's a situation where even if this team struggled, he still saw his 6+ targets per game. That's true insulation. You're not just getting those handoffs. Now that Mostert isn't a problem, Jalen Wright, he's explosive, sure, but I think the Dolphins already showed us what their plan looks like. They want Achane touching the ball 20 times a game. Not all of that is going to be between the tackles, but the floor we get from receptions and the ceiling makes him the best pick in round 2, in my opinion. That's really all it comes down to. You have to think through what does he actually gives us. He gives us the floor from the receptions, but he also gives us the ceiling from explosive plays, that usage that scales with game flow. He showed us last year that he's not a gadget guy. He's a true lead back in what is potentially, when it's at its best, a top 5 offense in the league. The fear with Achane is always the same. He's too small, he'll break down, this isn't sustainable, but that's really just not supported anymore. He already handled a full workload last season. Now you're saying that if he can't stay healthy, that's why you're not drafting him in this spot of the draft. It just doesn't check out for me that way. This is a hit waiting to happen. It really already did. He already gave you these running back 1 weeks that you're paying for this year. He's just gonna give you more bank production, more clarity, and more paths to upside than almost anyone in this tier. Certainly, in my opinion, anyone in round 2. So you grab as much Achane as you can in the second and you move on. But round 2 isn't all about wins. Right after Achane, there's a pick with a huge role built on nothing but red zone smoke and mirrors and a little bit of luck from last year. The worst round 2 pick in fantasy drafts this year is obvious, but on the surface, I get it. It all adds up. It feels completely safe. He's a big name. It's a big role. Double-digit touchdowns last year, but the more you dig, the more you realize every single thing that made Josh Jacobs hit last year is already at risk. Let's start with the workload. Jacobs was the guy in Green Bay. 337 touches, top 5 in carries, and inside the 10, he was a machine. No back had more touchdowns inside the 10 than Jacobs, not Henry, not CMC, obviously, not anyone. But here's the problem. The whole setup, it wasn't planned. It was kind of a mid-season pivot for the Packers. The offense stopped working through the air, and Jacobs happened to be in the right spot when they made that switch. Now, fast forward, you're drafting him in round 2, but everything that made him hit last year is super fragile. Let's look at the ecosystem around him. After the bye last year, Green Bay flipped hard into the run. Their rushing TD share went from 24% to 45%, and that's not some new identity. That's just a little bit of an overcorrection, which is unlikely to hold, especially that red zone workload. 14 of his touchdowns came inside the 10. He led the entire league in that stat, and that's not because of elite bursts, none of those things. It's because the offense kept stalling inside the red zone, and they leaned on him to clean it up. But here's where the problem starts. If Green Bay's offense improves, if they start to score on some of those like short yardage situations in the red zone, maybe they pass more, maybe they get a little bit more explosive over the top, and Jacobs is the one that doesn't benefit. He's the one that loses that red zone volume. This isn't a back who made up for it elsewhere. His success rate wasn't elite. He didn't really break long runs. He wasn't that much of a passing game weapon. It's all about touch count and touchdown density with this guy, but even that is risky because we've seen LaFleur before lean into a lot of these backfield rotations, and while there's no concrete committee now, the usage volatility, at least the possibility, is still very real. Even if Green Bay starts to spread things out a little bit again, you're kind of paying for this security, not the volatility that's disguised as like all of this volume that still has really no stability going into this year if things go right for Green Bay. But let's flip it for a second. Even if Jacobs gets 250 carries again, that doesn't guarantee anything because last year's production was so touchdown heavy, even slight regression there kind of nukes his value. This isn't CMC where the upside is just layered in all of these different lanes. There's really one outcome here. He has to keep scoring or he's gonna start giving you these 11-point games that kind of stall out your lineup if you're drafting a guy this high. We're already seeing some of these risks. The Packers improve their weapons. They're likely gonna be in a lot more scoring shootouts this year, and if the TD share shifts back towards the pass, Jacobs and his drafters are gonna be the ones that are holding the bag. So yeah, I just can't justify the ADP. You can say he was the running back 9 last year, but that's if you're honest about how he got there. It was a perfect storm. Short fields, red zone looks, in kind of a panicked offense that overfed him kind of out of necessity, not really out of what they wanted to be doing. So if any of that normalizes, he's not just a miss, he's a complete landmine in round 2. So you just passed on the riskiest running back in round 2, and now comes the craziest part of this entire video. There's a 3rd round back who's already doing everything that Jacobs needs to repeat, and almost nobody is treating him that way. But real quick, before I give you the best and worst picks of round 3, if you want my top 150 rankings for free, links in the description. That's what I'll be using every draft this year, but if your league gets it first, you're probably already cooked. What if I told you the best running back value in fantasy already showed us he's a bell cow, and no one's drafting him like it? His name is Chase Brown, and he's the best pick you can make in round 3, and it's not even close. Let's talk about the Bengals backfield. Zach Moss went down last year, and Cincinnati handled the entire offense to Chase Brown. We're not talking about like a 60-40 split here. We're talking about 90+% of the running back touches over the final 8 games. That's true bell cow territory, and he delivered. Over that stretch, 23.6 touches per game, 116 total yards, and almost a full touchdown. That's running back 1 usage. That's not projection, that's proof what he's already done. And now he's sitting in the middle of round 3 going after guys that still need an injury to sniff that type of workload. But here's what most people aren't processing. Cincinnati didn't just give Brown work, they leaned on him, not just between the tackles, but on early downs, but also on passing downs too. The Bengals also throw to their backs a ton, 21% of the time. That's one of the highest rates in the entire league. So that means checkdowns, screens, hot reads, all of the good stuff for fantasy. And in the 3rd round, it's the type of floor and ceiling that you need from a volume perspective. Zach Moss coming off an injury, Travion Williams is depth, P. Ryan got brought back, but he's really just a 3rd string floor guy, not a usage threat. Everything points towards Brown having the backfield on lock. They haven't really given us any reason to believe that it's not going to be the case. So suddenly what you're getting here is a feature back on a high tempo, high upside team with PPR access, explosive upside, and no immediate threat. And yet somehow he's going in the 3rd, not the 2nd. Not the turn, the 3rd. This is the part that trips people up. We want to believe that running back breakouts need some sort of big off-season moment, a new offensive coordinator, a new contract, depth chart headline, something. But sometimes the breakout has already happened. Chase Brown already had his moment. He already showed us that he can handle the volume, and the team didn't touch it. No free agent threat. No rookie investment. No real pass game specialist that can touch his role. That is the headline. And fading it because it doesn't feel new, that's how you miss in fantasy football. Because here's the truth, Chase Brown checks every box you want from a round 2 back, but you can get him in round 3. Don't overthink this. But it doesn't stop because the very next pick might be the biggest name in the round and the fastest way to lose your league before week 1 even kicks off. Check this out. It's round 3, you're on the clock, and Tyreek Hill is just sitting there, but here's the thing, that's not the guy you remember. Let's break down why Tyreek Hill is the worst pick in round 3. He's 31, coming off multiple wrist surgeries, and just posted one of the worst fantasy seasons of his career. 81 catches, 959 yards, just 6 touchdowns, the lowest yardage output since his rookie season. But that stat line doesn't even tell the full story. The explosiveness, his signature element, is completely gone. He had just 3 plays of 30+ yards last season. The year before, he had 23. That's not a decline, that's a complete collapse. But let's unpack why. The Dolphins' offense didn't just shift, it shrank. Tua's average intended air yards cratered to 5.7. The lowest in the entire league. He's already talking about in the offseason again that he needs to try and get the ball out quicker. Those deep shots that used to define this offense, those are gone, and Hill wasn't immune. His average depth of target dropped, of course, his yards per route run completely tanked, and his targets beyond 20+ air yards all but vanished. What you got instead was a lot of short game noise, screens, slants, bubbles, a speedy receiver stuck in a possessions role, and the result was a lot of volatility in fantasy. That week winning upside completely disappeared, and that week losing floor showed up more often than not. And what's wild is the wrist injury, yeah, but the volume was still there, so you would think that if he was catching these passes, it wouldn't really be affecting his efficiency as much as it did. We still need the full Tyreek Hill in this range of the draft. There's tons of upside that you're passing on to get there, because at some point we got to stack it with age. He's 31 years old, right on schedule with the cliff that caught guys like AJ Green, Brandon Marshall, Julio Jones. And just like them, you usually don't feel it until it's too late. The difference between dangerous and decoy is razor thin at this age. And Hill's just walking that line, because you're in round 3. You need a reliable wide receiver 2 here. You can't afford for your wide receiver 2 to turn into a gadget player. That's just not going to win leagues. So here's the reality. The ghost of 2022 isn't something that we want to be chasing in fantasy drafts, because this version of Tyreek, 31 years old, wrist issues, quick game offense, no deep threat, that isn't the league winner you remember. This is the kind of pick that you look back on in week 5 and you're just like, damn, that's the moment that my draft completely fell apart. So there you go. 6 picks, 3 that set your team up to win it all, 3 that bury you by October. The difference is knowing which is which before you're on the clock.